it was like the curtain of my reality was peeled back, and it's like, wow, doesn't everybody know this? How can people not know this? Hi, I'm Rebecca, and welcome to the Mama Lorian Way, where I'm documenting my journey from stay-at-home mom to millionaire. Today, I'd like to share about a book that has changed literally thousands of people's lives throughout the world by shifting how they look at money. And after reading it, I took one action that started the ball rolling towards our family's start of our journey to creation towards wealth. Before we dive into this book, please hit like, subscribe. Any bit of sharing, support, comments helps this channel grow. Thank you. All right, the book, you might have guessed it, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. And even though it was written in 1997, I think this book is totally relevant for people and their kids that don't have a basic understanding of the financial concepts that create and maintain wealth. And if you don't have them, you might be setting yourself up and your family for struggles down the road. So my husband and I were introduced to Rich Dad, Poor Dad. We went over to a friend's house, and she was making this really nice dinner. It was a tenderloin steak dinner, which I'd never even had before. And we were like, how is it that you're home making dinner right now? Because I know you have two businesses. And she's like, well, let me give you this book. The basic setup for Rich Dad, Poor Dad is Robert Kiyosaki, the author, has two dads, one rich and one poor. And his so-called poor dad, his biological dad, was a teacher, an academic who always struggled with having enough money and thought working hard his whole life was the answer to the struggles. And then Kiyosaki's rich dad was a friend's father. He was a self-made wealthy man, and he knew about investing and creating businesses to make wealth, and he made a life that he wanted. All right, no surprises there. There's a rich dad, there's a poor dad. But what's interesting is the takeaway lessons from each dad. And I'll distill it down into a few concepts that I'll talk about in this video and others down the road. So the concept today is your house is not an asset. And to understand this statement, we've got to think about what we consider to be an asset. So probably a lot of us think our houses or our cars or jewelry, things that we think have value, are assets. And we might think of the equity in our house, that the equity is, say, your house is valued in the market. You could sell it for $400,000. And you have a mortgage, a loan on your house for $200,000. Well, the difference at $200,000, what you have a loan on, what you could sell your house for, is called equity. And people are like, well, my house is worth $200,000 to me. Isn't that an asset? And I'm going to circle back around to that one. Robert Kiyosaki puts the idea of an asset up differently. It's not something of value. For him, an asset is something that flows money into your pocket. Money flows to you, cash flow to you. Now, unfortunately, cash can also flow away from you, and that's what he calls a liability. So your house could either be an asset or a liability, depending which way the cash flows. The house that you live in now, that you're paying a mortgage or taxes or insurance and maintenance, etc., on, is not flowing cash to you. It's flowing cash out to the bank, to the tax man. So in that case, it's a liability, cash flow out. Say you took that same house, divided it in half, rented out one half to somebody, some family that was paying enough to cover your cost, and even plus $1, that house would then be an asset because the costs are covered and you've got cash flow coming to you. What about that equity? What about that's hypothetical $200,000 you have in your house? Well, it's not an asset. There's no cash flowing out of it. There are ways that you can make that amount of money work for you, and then it would be an asset. And I'll talk about that in a second. Your car, probably a liability unless you're renting it out to an Uber person for more than you're paying on. What are other assets? Well, we talked about like renting out a house, and any real estate that brings more money to you than it's costing you is an asset. And there's also digital real estate now, websites or blogs that they can be cash flowing into you. Even email list can be an asset that drives money towards you if you're using your email list and selling some products, for example. Businesses like our friend that I talked about earlier, her business that worked when she was home making dinner is an asset. If you're there until midnight, it's probably more like a job, right? So one of our favorite kinds of assets is notes, and it's not the kind like you write in school to your friend, send to him. Notes, IOUs. They're loans that you make to people for whatever they need to buy, and you receive money and interest for the use of the money. And in real estate investing, it's called private lending or hard money. And I learned about this. My husband and I went to a real estate investing group called Lifestyles Unlimited. Wasn't a swingers club. And during this presentation, hard money, private money lenders came up to the front, and they said that they loan money out for rehabs and purchases of houses at 10 to 14%. And I was like, well, I have some of that. And thank goodness we had dinner at my friend's house. We had a different idea about an asset. And at that point, I had the guts, the courage to take a risk, to redo a mortgage that we had. It was a house that I owned, and it had been being rented out. It was almost paid off. I refinanced that house, pulled out cash, and we started lending it to real estate investors at 10%. And that money started working for me. And I was able to, with that money, send my kid through his preschool, pay for his preschool tuition with the money that was working for me. So that's another one of Kiyosaki's key concept is poor people work for money. Rich people's money works for them. Now, we're not rich by any standards, but I have been able to figure out ways of making our money work for us, and for bonuses like preschool tuition, and for a new car when literally our teenagers grew to 6 feet tall and they didn't fit in our old car. So as I go through learning more ways to make life easier, I'll keep sharing concepts with you, sharing concepts from books and ways that I've learned to make life easier. See you soon. We'll work together for our future selves. I'm Rebecca. This is the Mama Lorian Way.